you for joining us for this look at the best original reporting from KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Coming up, the end of Friendship Park. After more than 50 years, a new border wall is set to wipe out the international meeting place. North County's food desert. The closure of a supermarket in one neighborhood makes it that much harder for residents to find healthy options. And celebrating Spider-Man in San Diego, see the tribute to the superhero as Comic-Con gets ready to make its big return. This month will bring some of the biggest events of the year to San Diego. John Carroll caught up with local law enforcement who say the city is ready to keep those crowds safe.
When it comes to reasons to be worried over the coming weeks, local law enforcement can take its pick. Fresh in everyone's mind, the brutal, deadly attack on 4th of July parade goers in Highland Park, Illinois. And in June, Pride Month, a number of disturbing incidents, including what appeared to be a sizable planned attack on a Pride event in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, stopped by police at the last minute.
Safety is our number one concern for the San Diego Police Department.
In the shadow of Hillcrest's massive pride flag, a note of reassurance from San Diego Police. Lieutenant Jonathan Lowe talking about security preparations for San Diego Pride next week and Comic-Con a week later.
We're going to have uniformed officers and non-uniformed officers in the crowd, always watching over the parade route, the festival, and the associated parties around Hillcrest. Same goes for Comic-Con as well.
In the case of Pride, San Diego police are getting some extra help from the Hillcrest Business Association. The owner of Rich's Nightclub sits on the association board. He says he and his fellow Hillcrest business owners have been talking recently about how to make sure security this year is tighter than ever.
Our exits are clear, properly well lit. Our security staff is on point. We have extra security guards. They're trained. So those are all things that we've always take into consideration, but obviously more so on Pride weekend.
Security of big events came up this week when San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria appeared on KPBS Midday Edition.
It is frustrating to have this threat of violence across the nation impacting this event.
But Gloria says he's confident in law enforcement's ability to keep people safe.
I have full faith in our San Diego Police Department as well as our regional law enforcement partners.
But even with all the reassuring words, there is still that nagging reality that a person with a gun determined to cause mayhem and violence can. That's why the words that came into our lexicon after 9/11 still ring true today. If you see something, say something. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Activists are angered over the apparent end to one of the few places where people separated by the border can meet face to face. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis tells us why the Biden administration is moving forward with plans to rebuild the border wall at the expense of Friendship Park.
This latest announcement really amounts to the complete desecration of this historic location.
John Fanisil is a longtime advocate for Friendship Park. He says replacing the existing fence with two 30-foot tall walls would destroy any sense of binational unity in this space. Friendship Park is located in the coastal borderlands near Imperial Beach and has become hallowed ground for families separated by the border. Loved ones have used this park as a gathering space where they can see and even talk to each other. But plans for the new wall do not include gates or any space for families to see each other. Reverend Seth Clark says that he's shocked by the plans, particularly because President Joe Biden ran on a campaign promise to stop Trump's border wall.
And that's really disappointing, right? Because there was this promise that things were going to be different, that there would not be any more walls.
The park has actually been closed to the public since February 2020. It was initially closed because of heavy rain, but Customs and Border Protection hasn't reopened it, citing staffing issues. Clark says that families hoping to reunite with loved ones in Mexico still visit the park today, not knowing that it's currently closed. He's had to break the sad news to families traveling from as far away as Seattle.
And every time that happens, it's still a tragedy. It still breaks our hearts when we see that.
Customs and Border Protection confirmed their plans to relocate the existing fence, but the agency did not respond directly to questions about public access in the future. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
The week started with Independence Day, but many San Diegans were in no mood to celebrate. MG Perez was there as abortion rights supporters used their 4th of July as a day of protest.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now! It's a familiar chant and a very familiar fight for those women who remember a time before the 1973 Supreme Court ruling on Roe v. Wade that legalized abortion.
I mean, it was a battle. It was marches. It was in Washington. It was on the streets. It was constant. It was sitting in with legislators. And here we are again, 50 years later, doing the same damn thing. It's ridiculous.
Hundreds of abortion rights supporters wanted a place to be angry and heard today, more than a week after the current Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. So the Party for Socialism and Liberation San Diego took the lead in organizing this event in Balboa Park. They placed the blame for recent injustice on corporations and people in power.
Abortion rights, the attack on trans rights, police brutality, and endless wars, the root cause of all of those things is capitalism.
Not all the protesters here support socialism. They come with other beliefs and backgrounds, but they are united in demanding the truth, including their own personal stories that have nothing to do with politics.
So I made an extremely mentally, physically, and painful choice, and it was my choice to take a pill that terminated the pregnancy.
Organizers call this a protest, a rally, and a march, all of the above. They do not call it a celebration of American Independence Day. An online movement this holiday weekend flooded social media with the message that the 4th of July was canceled due to a lack of independence for women. Felicia Shaw is executive director of the Women's Museum of California here in San Diego.
As an African American, it's not my favorite holiday anyway, because it didn't have a lot of meaning for people who looked like me back then in the first place. So the day will come, the day will go, and we will still be looking for ways where we can galvanize and fight the good fight, because that's what needs to happen.
My body, my choice. Everybody, their choice.
Some say this good fight is for the future generations.
Obviously, this anti-abortion thing has been going on for decades now, and the culmination has been with these liars on the Supreme Court. And we must make some changes here. We must band together for the sake of our children.
That's a message these protesters hope was heard loud and clear. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Think of the nearest grocery store to your home. If it were to close down, how would it impact you and your family? KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne takes a look at how a Vons closing its doors in Vista could make it hard for some to access fresh, healthy food.
Mark Day and his wife Freddie Avalos used to get their groceries from Vons in Vista. The store was less than 5 minutes away from their house. But that Vons is now closed and boarded up.
Being able to have a grocery store that is very close and accessible has always been important to us. And that is why we're feeling really the strong effects of now being forced to drive a considerable way to get fresh food.
Avalos says Vons' closure doesn't come as a surprise because in the last couple of years, the shopping center started to feel unsafe.
There were many times where I would get out of my car and be accosted. And I stopped going there completely at night. I have not been to the Vons Center at night for at least 5 years. It simply does not feel safe. And I know that many people who also frequent that shopping center or used to frequent that shopping center feel the same way.
KPBS requested an interview with Vons to ask about the reason for the closure. The company did not respond. We did talk to some Vons employees who didn't want to be recorded out of fear of losing their jobs. Some think the store was closed because of the increase of homeless in the area and the thefts the store was dealing with on a regular basis. Others told us it was due to the high cost to repair the refrigeration system and the store not making a profit. No matter the reason, the Vons closure adds to the growing number of empty stores in the shopping center. Avalos thinks Vista City Council has neglected this part of the city while making improvements downtown.
They have moved mountains to bring in new stores and great restaurants and breweries, and it hasn't necessarily been bad. But we can't focus on one part of our community and then turn our back on another part.
Avalos says she and her husband are lucky to have a car and to be able to drive further, but she knows not everyone has that privilege.
People don't have the money for an Uber. People do not have friends or family that can take them regularly to the grocery store. And even when the Vons was here, one of the saddest things that I would experience, and this I saw every day, are poor people carrying, and their families carrying groceries, sometimes in the hot sun, sometimes in the rain.
76-year-old Alexis White doesn't own a car, but she has a motorized scooter.
So I get in it and ride over and bring the stuff back.
White lives in a senior community across the street from the Vons. She says many of her neighbors relied on it.
It's making it a hardship for a lot of people. I never knew that I would miss it.
Since the closure of Vons, White has made the journey to Winco and Oceanside, where she thinks groceries are affordably priced.
I think Winco being the cheapest store, and I guess it's not too far. I could take the bus over or the train.
City Council member Corina Contreras says food insecurity is an issue for many Vista residents, and the loss of a grocery store makes that problem worse.
It's really heartbreaking. I fear that the quality of nutrition is going to be going down, because what's most accessible there is you go to CVS, right? 7-Eleven. You're not going to be able to get the dietary needs for your children to grow up without, health concerns.
Contreras says the city council needs to discuss the safety concerns surrounding the shopping center and how to get the nearby residents access to fresh food.
We can't survive off of fast food. We can't survive off of convenience food. We're human beings and we need real food to grow. And we need a safe place to be able to shop. So, with Vons leaving, it really gives me a lot of concern about what's going to happen with that shopping center.
She says the city has no information on what is taking Vons' place because it is a private sale. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
And here are some of the most popular stories online this week at kpbs.org. Concerns over a new variant of the COVID-19 virus as BA.5 spreads at a rapid rate. The U.S. Embassy issues a security alert for Tijuana and Rosarito. And the city of San Diego says a strange odor in some local tap water is not harmful and only temporary. KPBS has reported on efforts by some San Diego City employees to refuse vaccinations, and it turns out that testing is also being challenged on religious grounds. Investigative reporter Claire Tregesser has an update on those at risk of being fired.
City confirmed it has issued advance notice of termination letters to at least 36 employees, half of them in the San Diego Police Department. KPBS obtained the letter templates through a Public Records Act. The letters say the employees' refusal to take COVID tests, quote, amounts to insubordination or serious breach of discipline. But the letters are just the beginning of the city's dismissal process for the workers, says city spokesperson Nicole Darling.
So city employees who were granted an exemption from the COVID-19 vaccination mandate are required to do the weekly testing. There are several employees in the police department who have failed to comply with that weekly testing accommodation. So those who fail to comply will be issued an advance notice of termination, and they will be afforded all of their due process rights and their rights to representation. So the city has issued already advance notice of termination letters to approximately 24 employees in other city departments for failing to comply with that weekly testing accommodation. Those employees have also been afforded their due process rights and rights to representation.
The city of San Diego approved the vast majority of requests to skip the COVID vaccine for religious reasons, but with the requirement that those employees then submit to regular testing. But about 10% of employees, most of them police, also insisted that testing violates their religious beliefs. They said their Christian beliefs instruct them not to use testing swabs because they contain ethylene oxide. The chemical is a known carcinogen, but it is not actually present on the swabs. It's used as a gas to sterilize them. Medical and religious experts say the employees' claims are groundless. KPBS asked Mayor Todd Gloria for his response to the claims. He says,
I think we have been exceedingly patient with these folks. We have worked on this on an individual basis to understand where they're at and what the concerns are. And so to the extent that individuals can be out of compliance and continue to work, that is not ideal. But we, of course, will follow our due process for these individuals and hope, as the vast majority of them have, that they'll come into compliance
Employees can appeal and then go through what's called a Skelly hearing. After that, if the city still decides to fire the employee, he or she would get a notice of termination from the department head. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
A recruit's death while training to be a Navy SEAL is raising new questions about safety during the grueling Hell Week boot camp. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says an autopsy released by the family shows inadequate medical care.
Regina Mullen says she trusted the SEALs with her son Kyle's life, and they failed him.
They're torturing our men. You can't do that to prisoners of war. There's war crimes, and they're doing it to our own athletic, young, bright men that are willing to give up their lives to serve the country. They're torturing them. It's not training.
Mullen had played football at Yale and Monmouth University. He died February 4th, hours after finishing Hell Week. The endurance test is part of the notoriously difficult SEAL basic training. The autopsy confirms her son was left alone in the barracks with other candidates who had also showed signs of being sick. Kyle Mullen was found unresponsive on the barracks floor after another candidate called for medical help for himself.
Severe pneumonia. There's no way a 23-year-old healthy boy should die of severe pneumonia. And that's a disgrace that he was not treated for days. They knew he had it.
He was found with a 36-ounce bottle filled with his own blood and mucus. The autopsy revealed Mullen died of Streptococcus pyogenes, a type of pneumonia often associated with military bases. Regina Mullen is a registered nurse. She says her son was struggling to breathe when he called her a few hours before he died.
You all knew that my son was compromised. The medical team, the instructors, the lieutenant, the commander had to have known. They were all standing where he was secured, seeing the guy spitting up blood. You sent him to the barracks, sent the medical team home, and you let him die.
Hell Week is virtually unchanged since at least the 1970s. For nearly a week, candidates are submerged in the Pacific Ocean, forced to continually swim or march with boats on their back. They get little sleep. Some SEALs say by the end they were hallucinating. Regina Mullen says her son was told he could get medical help if he rang a bell 3 times. But that was also the signal that he wanted to give up.
It's where you have to ring a bell, and then they'll give you medical. And ringing the bell is quitting.
That is a game that the instructors play. That's absolutely true that they say stuff like that. It is not absolute. It is absolutely untrue that they meant it.
Robert Adams is a medical doctor and former SEAL. He wrote a book about Hell Week. Adams says medical teams are there to monitor candidates at least during the exercise.
I've, over the years followed SEAL training as a physician looking back and seen numerous reports of pneumonia, usually in somebody that's pulled out of Hell Week and told you can't go on, and they're screaming, please don't pull me.
If they don't continue, candidates either leave or they can be rolled back to try again with a later class. Mullen had already been rolled back once. Regina Mullen says SEALs told her that instructors liked Kyle and they pushed him to finish the last couple of days. But she says candidates shouldn't have to decide if they can do it.
They probably don't even know what day of the week it is. They're probably delirious, altered mental status. How can you expect them to make that decision knowing what their medical condition is?
The U.S. military often talks about training like you fight. Hell Week is more of a test of physical and psychological endurance. Instructors try to push candidates past what they think are their limits. Jeff Butler is a former SEAL.
Really, the goal of it is to weed out people that aren't going to just have the mental fortitude to not quit when it gets absolutely terrible. I mean, guys that will go until they have literally life-threatening pneumonia.
Butler's father was also a SEAL. While warfare has changed dramatically over the decades, Hell Week hasn't.
It's a ritual to see who gets to be part of their organization. I'm sure that's how they see it. They're consider themselves gatekeepers of who is good enough to be in the community. That's how the instructors often saw themselves.
Secretary of the Navy Carlos Del Toro told Congress in May that after Mullen's death, the SEALs now have medical staff available instead of just on call after Hell Week. His mother says that's not enough. She says they need an outside investigation. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
3D technology being used here in San Diego is helping doctors improve their craft. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman shows us how it works in the operating room.
Shoulder surgeries at Scripps Health are taking on a whole new dimension.
Bringing VR or mixed reality to the operating room has been an interest for a while now.
Orthopedic surgeon Brian Rebolledo is the first Scripps doctor to use a mixed reality system for shoulder replacement surgeries. It's not virtual reality because doctors can still see what they're doing. Surgeons wear a headset with special eyeglasses. They show holographic surgery models in 3 dimensions. To the doctor, the images look like they're almost suspended up in the air.
That's when we can then manipulate those holograms, place them over where we need to have them. You look a little funny. It's voice command. It's visual command here with your fingers, but I can drag that over almost as if it'd be a piece of art that you're replicating.
To create the hologram model, patients first have to undergo a CT scan. Rebolledo says precision is key when it comes to shoulder procedures, and being able to have a digital reference right in his eye line helps with complicated operations.
Shoulder replacement, as in a lot of surgery, it's a game of millimeters. And, to be off by just a little bit can really have severe implications. And so for us to be able to use this and make it really perfect each time, I think is a significant value and significant benefit to patients here.
Last week, Rebolledo successfully completed his first shoulder implant using this new mixed reality system. He says the technology is not a fad, and it's all geared toward improving patient outcomes.
You think about how surgery has changed really even in the last 10 years. I mean, we have robots now in the operating room. We now are bringing mixed reality headsets in the operating room. Our implants are getting better.
The mixed reality system was created by medical supplier Stryker. A spokesperson says this technology focuses on shoulder surgeries, but other companies use similar versions for spine and hip procedures. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
A reminder that you can find all of our content on the KPBS YouTube page. We also live stream episodes of KPBS Evening Edition. That's weeknights at 5. After missing 2 years, Comic-Con returns in full force to the convention center this month. Already we're seeing events pop up. Beth Accomando takes us to the Comic-Con Museum in Balboa Park.
Spider-Man turns 60 this year, but the iconic Marvel superhero will forever be ingrained in our pop culture consciousness as a teenager.
One of the things that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko kind of stumbled into, I think, was when they took the concept of the teenager, which was relatively a new concept even in sociological terms, and decided that they could turn the superhero into an allegory for that pain of being a teenager. And I think that that has persisted through many, many versions of Spider-Man, that he remains the superhero who is relatable precisely to the degree that he's misunderstood, that he's insecure, that he tries to do the right thing, but it isn't always recognized that he's done so, that there is no reward for being Spider-Man, and yet he continues to do it. I think a lot of people empathize with and respond to that.
He was kind of a kid. He was youthful, and I felt like he was, even then, I recognized that he was a pretty relatable character, and I wanted to be Spider-Man. I wanted to put on that suit and swing around the city.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can.
You can relate to and admire the opportunity to climb up walls and swing over the city and shoot webs out of your hands.
Right.
There is something just really innately just amazing about Spider-Man.
Comic-Con Museum goes beyond amazing with a new exhibition celebrating the popular web-slinger. The exhibit was co-curated by Ben Saunders and Patrick Reed.
We have 60 years worth of pop cultural material to draw upon from across pretty much every available media platform.
We are very conscious of the innate power of the museum medium to tell stories. It is based around historical artifacts, objects, original comic book art, film props, but then we also use all sorts of modern techniques, lighting, projections, high definition digital canvases to tell the story in a more kinetic way.
Sometimes telling that story involves peeling back the curtain to look at the creative process through the original art that was used to create the comic books.
It's production art. It wasn't originally intended for display. It's the hand-drawn originals from which this whole world-spanning franchise comes. There's an aura around those objects. Knowing that this started with the work of an individual with a pencil and a piece of Bristol board, I find that phenomenally moving. Those are the pieces that I always want to stop in front of and spend more time with.
But visitors may also be drawn to the photo ops offered by life-size statues.
I'm standing next to one of my favorite pieces in the whole thing. because we've never brought him to life in any like this anyway. This is a one-to-one. If he were real, this is exactly how big he'd be.
Spider-Ham represents another amazing thing about Spider-Man. Any one of us, including a pig, could be him.
Some of that comes back again to that key idea about design. A mask that covers the entire face. That was a genuinely unusual design choice for the superhero genre in the 1960s, but it allows a different kind of imaginative engagement.
There's an entire Spider-Verse that has been spawned out of that.
Right.
And it is a character that, it is a blank mask. You cannot see any facial features, so he could be anyone.
He's like us, but he has this extraordinary element on top of it. Some of the genius of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko in creating the character was that anybody could be under that mask. It could be any one of us, regardless of color, creed, religion, sexual orientation, whatever. It could be any of us.
And any of us can learn from Peter Parker about what we want to be and to stand up for in a world where things not only go wrong, but often are wrong.
It's something that is built into the Marvel Universe since the 1960s. In particular, Stan Lee's position against bigotry, against racism, that was an absolutely and sincerely held belief, which he wanted to inject into the story material from at least the mid-60s onwards.
Whatever life holds in store for me, I will never forget these words. With great power comes great responsibility.
How much better off would we all be if there were more people in the world in positions of power who understood that some responsibility comes with that role? It's a good message.
Spider-Man Beyond Amazing reminds us of that message. It'll also make your spidey senses tingle with its marvelous look at the legacy of an iconic character. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
We hope that you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thanks for joining us.